Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Everything's rolling that needs to roll. Hi, everybody. My name is Joe Champ. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Journalism and Media Communication here at CSU, and I'm really honored to be able to moderate this session that really looks at video and storytelling in wildlife. One thing I want you to watch for, I had the pleasure to look at the work that these folks have been doing. And I want you to think in terms of, and they are artists. You know, we oftentimes think of journalism and communication. We think of information transfer, things like that, science communication. But they're also artists, and that's not noted enough. And what I want you to, one thing that came to me as I was watching their work is how they're really trying to blur the boundaries that are always there between humans and nature. And maybe we can come back to that later in the hour. But that's one thing that came to me, is how they're using their craft, their art, to bring us together, to integrate us, to synthesize us, and so we're not separate from nature, and it's very important, so we'll come back to that. Our first speaker will be, I'm going to just quickly go through these information for their introductions. First speaker will be Tomas Hoppough, an award-winning solo video journalist and national correspondent for EW Scripps. He has covered extensive breaking news stories on the George Floyd protests in Minneapolis, the Uvalde shooting, I just watched a story that he did on that, Hurricane Dorian in the Bahamas. Thomas specializes in long-form documentary-style storytelling and produces in-depth packages and documentaries for scores of newspapers and television organizations at the Scripps Howard properties across the United States. He believes in telling stories that have a strong journalistic impact, and that'll be obvious when you see his work. He also believes in mastering the basics and foundations of storytelling on deadline and transition to then long form. We'll be looking at a really interesting video of his on wolves. The next person to speak will be Anne Herbst. She's the director of visual journalism at KUSA-TV in Denver. She's the director of the National Press Photographers Association, NPPA, Advanced Storytelling Workshop. She regularly writes, she shoots, she edits, and produces news and feature stories from around Colorado. And she believes that local news can make viewers proud to live in their state, and you'll sense that in her work. Really interesting. And her stories are featured primarily on 9 News. Her video journalism has been honored with 5 National Edward R. Murrow Awards and numerous Emmys. She's been recognized in the NPPA Photographer of the Year competitions regionally and nationally, and she won the national award as NPPA Solo Journalist of the Year, which is really amazing. Anne loves telling stories, hiking with her husband, Steve, and her dog, Gidget, who's not here today. She loves the San Juan Mountains. She loves craft beer. That really makes sense with Colorado, travel, and teaching journalism. She'll be followed third by Boyd Huppert. Boyd has worked for 26 years at KARE-TV in Minneapolis. He's widely known for his work as a video storyteller and teacher. Boyd reports and produces the station's Land of 10,000 Stories segment. Look that up online. It's really fun to see his stories. In addition to his reporting duties, Boyd serves as national storytelling coach for 49 newsrooms of TEGNA, the organization that owns KARE. Independently, Boyd has presented hundreds of visual storytelling workshops across the United States. So he's really getting these ideas out there, which is important, and abroad as well. His work as a reporter has earned some of journalism's highest honors, including 21 National Edward R. Murrow Awards, multiple National Headliner and Sigma Delta Chi Awards, the Scripps Howard Award, and the National Emmy for Feature Reporting, and more than 130 regional Emmys. I've got like 4 of those, 130. I'm totally impressed. And then finally, Chad Nelson. He believes, and I like this, he believes that good storytelling brings people to life, while great storytelling keeps them alive forever, which is a beautiful thing to say. He is a Minnesota native who studied mass communication with an emphasis in broadcast journalism at Minnesota State University, that's in Moorhead. And upon graduation, he launched his career at WDAY-TV, call letters, in North Dakota. But in 2010, then, he left Fargo for KSTP-TV in St. Paul. And then in 2014, he moved to KARE, where he could do some work with Boyd, which we'll see here in a second, that in Minneapolis. In 2017, Chad earned dual honors from the National Press Photographers Association, winning awards as Photographer of the Year and Editor of the Year, which is just absolutely amazing. In 2018, he repeated as National Photographer of the Year. And outside of storytelling, Chad creates memories with his wife, Cassie, his son, Conway, a daughter, Campbell, and his two dogs, Cannon and Cedar. So welcome, everybody. Let's have applause for you. So, each person's got about 10 minutes each. They're going to show us a little bit of their work and then talk about it. We might even have some time for questions and answers. And we'll start off with Tomas. Yeah, come on up here. Yes, that'd be perfect. Let's switch with this.
All right, sweet. We only have 10 minutes, and my piece is 5 minutes, so perfect. So I only got 5 minutes to talk to you all. So how many of you do still photography? Raise your hand. Okay, and how many does video? Okay, so half and half. So I do primarily video, but I travel like every other week. And I also try to take stills while I'm doing my stories, and I try to translate that in the stories that I do. So I want all my shots to kind of look like a picture, be well composed, and the reason that I want to do that is bring you there to the story that we're doing. So the things that I like to do a lot is like coexisting, stories about coexisting, whether it's with nature and humans or with the indigenous communities and modern America. That's what I'm trying to do a lot of times with my stories. So I've done a lot of stories on climate change, stuff on oil drilling on sacred lands in Alaska that could affect the caribou. And then I've also done some stories on wolves and coral reef defenses and stuff like that. The thing that I'm not going to say that, well, kind of. The thing that, in my opinion, that I think video is a lot more fun than stills. Sorry, still people. Like, I'm not trying to discredit that. Stills are great, but the thing about video is I'm able to bring more elements into it, bring you there with sound, and you can see it and even maybe smell it maybe if you're just looking at it. But that's what I try to bring in my stills and all the shots that I'm putting in there. The difference between what I do and wildlife photography is I'm not really a wildlife photographer, but I'm a journalist. So I'm trying to do stories about how we are affecting wildlife or how we are impacting wildlife in a positive way as well. So trying to find that balance. So that's what I do with my journalism, and my photography can bring them there and make you feel and maybe make you care, maybe make a change in some way or another. So I'm going to show you this piece that we titled War on Wolves, that we did part of it here in Colorado and the other part in Montana as well.
We're in a little mountain town in Divide, Colorado.
There are creatures that have been here longer than we have.
This is a sanctuary here for wolves, coyote, and fox.
And there are those that are fighting to make sure they stay as long as we do.
Yes, I know, dear, she is. She's a good girl, she is.
My name is Darlene, and I'm the CEO Director of Colorado Wolf and Wildlife Center.
She's just a sweet girl, she is.
I never thought in my wildest dreams that I would be working with wolves. It basically started with one wolf dog that I rescued from a shelter that was going to be euthanized because she had part wolf in her. And when I rescued her, she was my inspiration of wanting to be a voice for wolves. I see a majestic animal. I see intelligence. They've been one of the most persecuted animals, in history.
The gray wolf has been classified by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as an endangered species throughout the country since 1978. According to Fish and Wildlife, there are only 1,000 gray wolves total, only in Minnesota. Now there are more than 5,000 across the country, but there are disagreements on whether this number defines the population has recovered.
Western Colorado is 70% public land, federal public land, and it's time for wolves to be back there.
Rob Edward is with the Rocky Mountain Wolf Project. Their primary goal? To reintroduce the gray wolf back into Colorado.
They are as important to the forests of the West as a wildfire. And without them, our forests and our wild places are impoverished.
So we have about 1,500 wolves in the Yellowstone area today.
In 2011, the gray wolf was dropped from that endangered list in Idaho and Montana. Now, the Trump administration will seek to end those federal protections for the gray wolf across the whole country.
Once they come off the endangered species protection list, then they don't have the protections anymore. Then it's open season.
The proposal would give states the authority to hold wolf hunting and trapping seasons, while those trying to protect and restore the species are against this. There are those who think this is the only way to coexist.
Come on, get in there. Ranching, it's a tough life. It's hard to make a living when you're against Mother Nature.
Here in Montana, there's been a long feud between wolves and ranchers.
I'm Martin Davis, fourth generation rancher here in Paradise Valley, Montana. We've been here on the ranch for 55 years. All of my working life has been right here on the ranch. One of the big problems that we've had were the reintroduced wolves they brought back to Yellowstone. Come on, Junior. Early on, they were, of course, on endangered species list. We could do nothing but shoo them away. We were one of the first ranches in the country here to have problems with those Yellowstone wolves. We have lost livestock to wolves. We've had some neighbors to lose horses, the wolves run horses through a fence and cut them up and maim them enough, then the wolves fed on them. My life savings is tied up in my cattle. And when you have something out there stealing your life savings, it's a hard pill to swallow.
Gray wolves are off the endangered species list here and are allowed to be hunted in 3 different seasons throughout the year.
I think taking them off nationwide, it has to be done. We aren't saying they're going to kill every wolf in the country again. That's not the point. Taking them off the endangered species list so the numbers can be managed. I don't hate wolves. I do not. I can see the argument that they don't want to see the wolf go away again. But I don't think that's a worry if they're managed correctly.
Coda is 11 years old, whereas Amarok is actually 5.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife have until March 2020 to decide if the gray wolf comes off the endangered species list nationwide.
I think they remain protected. There are not enough still yet as far as genetic diversity.
The national delisting has come around several times in different forms and been beaten back by national nonprofit groups in the courts. That doesn't mean it'll be beaten back this time.
I don't hate them as long as they are in their place.
1, 2, 3.
We still live in a world where man and beast are trying to coexist, but it's up to man's decision on how that's done. I'm Tomas Hoppough reporting.
Yeah, so, that's a little look into what I do. We've done follow-ups on that. I mean, you all have been following it with everything with wolves and stuff like that. And I think that's the importance of what we do is to keep covering those stories, keep covering those issues on how to coexist, and continue to bring that into the headlines for people to care about it. And if there's a way that we can bring you there and show you it, that's the elements that I think journalists and videographers bring to the table when it comes to some of these wildlife issues. So, cool. Yep. Any questions?
Yes.
I don't use GoPros, period. Actually, those are the 3 lenses I use. I shoot with a Sony a7S III, and then I use a 24-70, a 16-35, and a 70-200 to kind of get whatever I need. I don't use a big, telephoto lens or anything like that because I'm trying to get close enough. And but not only am I just doing stuff on wildlife, but I have to find that connection between people and wildlife. So when I did a story on using lead-free ammo, and I went out with a hunter, I'm using that as well to get close to the deer and everything like that and get a good shot. But no, I'm never using GoPros for anything. I'm going to be there for it.
Time for one more, yes.
Obviously, people are a really big part of storytelling, even when it comes to wildlife. It's all about interaction. But when it comes to building a character profile, how do you you're starting from scratch and you've got a new character, how do you approach that? How do you try and flesh out who that person is and how they relate to the story?
Yeah, so when I'm trying to find somebody to centralize my story, I'm trying to find somebody who's passionate about whichever side of the issue it is. If I have people that don't care about the issue, then my viewers aren't going to care either, and I'm not going to care. And so I need to incorporate these types of people in my story, and the way that I do that, go about that is look for people in that area of that story that I'm covering, and give them calls, and I have a good inclination that they are passionate about it, like that rancher. I just hit him up because I knew his ranch was in that Yellowstone area, But as far as finding these characters, it's crucial to have that in your stories because they're the ones affected or they're the ones that are having an impact on those stories and on that wildlife. And if you can't just tell that, if you're just telling it without those people, no one's going to care about it. So that's like the most important thing I do with my job is getting these people that care, and then getting the wildlife that's affected by it comes second.
Okay, we're going to take some more questions later, but let's hear from Anne. Thanks, Tomas, very much.
What's up? How you guys doing? Yeah. Okay. Come on, buddy. Nope. Wrong story. Yeah, when Greg asked me to do this, I'm like, well, I'm not a wildlife photographer at all, and I think it's a little weird for me to be here doing this in front of professionals. And I said this as I'm working on a year-long project about wildlife. Like, made no sense. Like, I'm immersed in this project about wildlife, and I said, I don't really do this. I think this work, obviously we live in Colorado, I live here. This type of work is really important to bring awareness to what's happening to our environment here. My master's degree was an emphasis in science and environmental reporting. And so I do these stories because I care about these issues, and I put wildlife makes people connect to these issues a little better than like when you're talking about drought and you're just showing water and those problems, but if you're showing how that affects nature, people really respond to that. And so I've done a couple stories on sandhill cranes, and this is one of them. This is how COVID affected the sandhill crane migration into the Monte Vista area. And COVID doesn't affect migration, in case you guys wondered. Birds don't care, but people do, and bringing people down into a small area can be a little dicey. So I will play this and answer any questions you might have about it.
The light is gorgeous. We have a beautiful sunrise. And we're surrounded by wildlife. We're surrounded in nature.
Man, don't you just love Colorado?
I think it doesn't get much better than this.
Barbara Fleming knows what's up. She's a wildlife photographer and all-around cool person, even at 6 a.m.
My dog looked at me like I was crazy, which I probably am.
Barbara is here to capture the sandhill cranes.
Flapping their wings fiercely.
They descend on Monte Vista National Wildlife Refuge every spring.
I totally love the noise. It's mesmerizing. Look at all of them way out there. There's thousands of them.
More like tens of thousands.
You know, most of us have spent a year or more in isolation, having to stay home. And all we have to do is step out and just drive a little bit. And we're in a magical Wonderland. This is better than Disneyland.
Though the birds clearly don't know about social distancing. The people who run the area's annual crane festival do.
This is so incredible. Look at all of them flying around.
The event's 38th year will be held virtually, but organizers still want people like Barbara
Here they come.
to spread out on this open space.
I feel like I can take a deep breath and relax a little bit and feel like I'm going to be okay. You know, it gives me a sense of hope. And that's exciting. Woo!
It's hard not to get caught up in Colorado.
I'm a sandhill crane.
The only state with rad in the middle is still rad all over.
It's the place to be when there's a pandemic going on.
For next, this is Anne Herbst. Yeah, does anyone have a question? Obviously, I found a central character who's probably a lot like you guys, where the pandemic was tough, but having this outlet was such a big deal and kind of a savior for a lot of people who had cameras in their hands, because you could still do it. And those animals were still going to be around. And does anyone have any questions about that story?
Yep. Or,
I guess I just have a question about, I know sandhill cranes are doing pretty well at this point. In the past, numbers were down, but in terms of the Monte Vista area, how's the habitat? Are cranes thriving there?
So I also shot another story when I was down there that you could look up online about what's happening down there to the habitat, because it's a really big farming area, and they're not growing the things that sandhill cranes used to like to come and eat. The wetlands are drying up down there, so people are worried, definitely worried, that they won't be coming back in 20 years. The numbers are fine now, they're not going down, but there's definitely people out there, biologists out there, who are concerned about drought, because San Luis Valley is the water table, the groundwater is going down quite a bit. Sandhill cranes come to roost and mate and all that jazz in that area because of the water. They hang out in the water, they sleep in it. So definitely they're concerned about that, and I did like a 5-minute piece. I went down there and did this fun one on the Crane Festival, and then I did something that used my master's degree a little bit more. Yeah, there.
What a great piece. I love the character, and I love the personality in your narration. I'm sort of curious, if you said you're not a wildlife photographer, but I'm just curious what drew you to that project, and do you think you'll continue to do wildlife photography in the future?
Yeah, so I'm working on a piece that will air in December, where I'm following a wildlife photographer through the year to talk about what people shouldn't be doing when they're interacting with wildlife, because there's been obviously a lot of problems in the West with that. And she talks a lot about conservation and how these photographs that she takes and your photographs that you take bring awareness to species that people may not know about. I'm really interested in anything that comes, that's science or environment related, because I think we can really help people understand these issues through like cute animals. It helps, right? I definitely am always going to shoot wildlife here because it's part of what makes this state wonderful. And as you heard in my bio, I want to make everyone proud to live here. And that's part of what makes it great to live here, right? So yeah, I'm going to continue doing it. I love it.
Did you know this woman was going to be there, or just found her when you got there?
I met her, I want to say 10 years ago, and I've kept in touch with her. I met her on another story where I was out and I knew that she was a wildlife photographer. I've done 2 stories with her because this is the last one I'm going to do with her, but she's so good at reacting to what's going on in front of her. When you find a really good character, I keep in touch. When I find a really good character, I keep in touch with them. And I'm friends with her. She wants me to go to Africa with her and do a photo safari with her, and she told me she'd pay for it, and I'm pretty sure I can't accept that, but that's how close I got with people. Like, I love that woman, and how can you not? Barb is...
Time for
Yeah,
one more.
one more.
You shot that in how many hours? And just a compliment that your narration is perfect.
I sound like me, right?
How many times you did that, but you really did kind of your upbeat, like fun, humorous voice was excellent.
I did that in a hotel room in Monte Vista under a blanket. And I shot that. That aired in the 6th, and I got up in the morning with her, and I wrote, I was done with her at 9, wrote the story, tracked it, air. That's a pretty quick one. The other one I did on the drought part of this story, I spent some more time on that, so that story was longer, but this one was really quick. Thank you, appreciate it.
Hey, Ann, thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Next up is Boyd Huppert from KARE-TV in Minneapolis.
Thanks for the invitation to be here today. We're spending the week on campus working with about 25 to 30 reporters, photographers, multimedia journalists, and we're talking about storytelling, and it's so nice that it worked that we could be here with you too, as well. I produce a segment for my station in Minneapolis called Land of 10,000 Stories, and if you ask me what it's about, I would tell you that I'm looking for stories that touch people's hearts, and sometimes that's wildlife. Minnesota's a state that loves the outdoors, and people feel really connected, particularly with loons. It's our state bird, and I, like a lot of Minnesotans, love to boat, and there's nothing like being out on a lake in Minnesota in the evening as the sun is setting and hearing that cry of the loon, or if you're lucky, a loon pair will float by the boat as you're parked. And so Devin Krinke, who actually, I wanted to pull up this photo. Devin. So I'm not a Mac person. Oh, there's my cursor. I think this is Devin. No, that's not. I lost that photo. Can you help me find that again?
I think some of the windows got closed.
Yeah, I think so. But Devin is one of the photographers that I work with at KARE. I work primarily with Chad, who's here, and Devin Krinke. And Devin is a farm kid from North Dakota, and grew up hunting and fishing, and has an interest in the outdoors himself. So he often brings me story ideas that jive with his interests. So Devin had read about a phenomenon that had been taking place in northern Wisconsin. This was 3 or 4 years ago. And that brought me to call Walter Piper, and Walter Piper is a loon researcher. He's had an ongoing project in Oneida County, Wisconsin, on loons and their behavior, and has been studying loons since 1993. He's a professor at Chapman University in Orange, California. And one of his students, his research assistants, early in, and you'll meet her in the story, early in her days with him, working on his loon project in the early part of the summer, had come back and said, wow, loon chicks look a lot like ducklings. And turns out she had been looking at a duckling that had been adopted by a pair of loons. And so Devin and I decided that sounded like one of those stories that Minnesotans would really connect with. And there's Devin. That's actually we're shooting the story, and that's Dr. Piper out in the other canoe that you're looking at. And we were fortunate because visuals are very important to our storytelling, and there had been a photographer named Linda Grenzer, a naturalist, photographer. Linda and her husband operate a loon rescue organization, and she had been documenting this phenomenon throughout the summer, so that by the time we got there in late summer, she had some beautiful photographs and video that she was generous enough to share with us. So I think if I can find the video now, where'd the video go? Chad, do you know where can you help me out with that?
Sure can. This never happens. He never needs my help.
I always need his help. That is the reporter-photographer relationship. Whenever there's anything technical, it's, Chad, can you help me?
Oh, it is. Okay, perfect.
I've got it here.
Here it is, right here.
Cool.
There you go, boss.
I think this. There we go. All right.
He is called to the lakes by loons.
In the fog, it could be a task to find him.
Dr. Walter Piper, who's devoted his career to loon research, has been returning to the lakes of Wisconsin's Oneida County for nearly 3 decades.
Oh, here they are.
But the discovery of the summer belongs to one of Dr. Piper's newest interns.
So you didn't know what you'd found?
No, I had no idea.
So new was Evelyn Doolittle. She'd never before seen a loon chick.
All 3 chicks still intact.
On another lake, she might have spotted this rare brood of 3.
This is pretty impressive.
But what Dr. Piper's intern saw that June day was even more unlikely.
I got back and I said to my coworkers, wow, chicks sure look a lot like ducklings.
Looked like a duck because it was.
Right from the start, I knew this was something special.
Linda Grenzer, a Wisconsin loon photographer, was summoned to document what Dr. Piper's intern had seen.
The mom's on the left, the dad's got the duckling on its back.
Not possible, she thought.
They don't like them.
The two are natural enemies, to the point loons have been known to kill baby ducklings.
The loon is the head honcho of the lake, and the ducks better move for it.
So what gives?
Very protective of his duckling.
Turns out the loon pair does.
It's mind-boggling.
Dr. Piper's team.
It's never happened before.
Found evidence the loon parents had hatched a chick of their own, most likely killed by a predator shortly after birth, about the time a duckling became separated from its mother.
It must have happened the same day.
They needed each other badly.
Out of loss came a family.
This is their child, yes, their chick. And they're doing everything they can to protect it.
And with more trips to the lake, the surprises kept coming.
The duckling started diving, which they don't do.
Not mallards.
It learned it from the loons.
Yet there was Linda shooting video as the baby mallard stayed underwater for 10 seconds till it popped up right there.
Loons do it, ducks don't. Except for this one.
Nor are mallards big fish eaters.
I just don't think any of us believed it. We were just in awe.
Till another of Dr. Piper's interns snapped these photos of a little muskie being served.
They don't eat fish.
To a duckling eating fish like it's Friday night at a Wisconsin tavern.
I'm seeing something that I'll probably never see in my entire life again.
Not even 2 weeks ago, on her last visit, Linda snapped these photos of a well-fed and growing duckling.
You can see, look how low that back is. All duck, hardly any loon showing.
If 2 rival species can make this work, maybe there are lessons beyond the lake.
You know, we humans look at other humans a little bit different from ourselves and see only the differences. You know, maybe humans could learn a lesson or two from them.
Nothing is beyond imagining once you've witnessed the impossible. Boyd Huppert, KARE-11 News, Tomahawk, Wisconsin.
So that was, thank you. When someone asks me why I love my job, it's stories like that. I was in a Hobie. The Grenzers were kind enough to loan us, Devin and I, each a Hobie. So we were each in Hobies, and it was just that beautiful morning with the fog. You know, it's funny how we envisioned a nice sunrise over the lake, and we were bummed when we were driving over, looking at the weather forecast, realizing there wasn't going to be a pretty sunrise to start the story, and then, you know, God gave us something even better. You know, that fog was just so pretty, and gave us some really nice visuals to accompany a really lovely story. Any questions? Yes, up there. Yeah, I definitely checked. The next season, everyone was wondering, loons returned to the same lake, and everyone was wondering if the duckling would come back and if there'd be any further interaction. And there wasn't, so there's no way of knowing what became of the duckling. Yeah, there are some things in nature that are still a mystery. It was certainly fun to be part of this one. And the story, you know, the wonderful thing about stories like this is they do well too. You know, we have, you know, when I say do well, because of social media and Facebook and Twitter, we can kind of monitor the amount of viewer interest in a particular story now, and this one did really well. There was interest. I received a number of emails afterwards, just like you know, wondering whether they migrated together or what became of them. And unfortunately, we don't know the answer to that. But it's wonderful to see viewers connect with the story, and then we get to do more of that type of story. It tells our bosses that, you know, there's an interest in nature and animals and wildlife.
Time for one more.
Yes, sir.
You're a reporter, you work with a photographer as a team.
Right, exactly.
Much these days?
Yeah, smaller stations, it's almost all what we call an MMJ, multimedia journalist, where the journalist, the reporter, is also shooting his or her own video. Anne works like that a lot. Tomas works like that exclusively, I believe. At KARE-TV in Minneapolis, we're about half and half. So we have MMJs who work almost exclusively as MMJs. We have MMJs who sometimes work with a photographer. And then, you know, I'm one of the old guys in the newsroom. I've been around a while, and I was kind of grandfathered into just working, because I am a grandfather, I guess, just working as a reporter who's really lucky to be teamed up with some really, really talented photojournalists like Devin and Chad.
Boyd Hooper, thanks.
Thank you.
And speaking of Chad,
I'll let you take care of that.
Yep, I'm good. All right, as mentioned, my name is Chad Nelson. So, you know, similar to what Anne was talking, I would not classify myself as a wildlife photographer, but I do love wildlife. I have two little kids. They're 4 and 6. And so we're at that age right now where everything is like exploring, and I love watching them see wildlife, bugs and animals. And we happen to live in the heart of Minneapolis, in the city, but we live in this lovely area where we have a creek in the front yard, a lake about 2 blocks away, and so we get to experience nature through all the time. And I love that in the city, where everyone always thinks of, it's the city folk. You know, I can't tell you how many times when I'm out in the rural area and someone calls me a city-it or something like that, and I chuckle and laugh because I kind of am. But I love that those two worlds still live together, right? That city life, that nature, that they can come together. So throughout the spring, we usually get First, we usually get the migrating birds first along the creek. The lake that I'm near is one of the first lakes to open because the creek runs into it, so we get the loons. Earlier this year, I was out there. I counted 22 loons on our lake. It's a very small lake in the middle of the city, but that's the first one to open up, so they will stop there, actually be friendly to each other, which is a rare occurrence, as many of you probably know with loons. But I love that my kids can be a part of that in the middle, because I love that those two worlds really tie together. And I know that was mentioned at the beginning of how John had felt that we showed that a lot. Anyways, so that's what I'm always kind of looking for, is like, where are those two worlds coming together? Where can we be relatable as human beings to the animals that we live amongst? So what I'm always looking for anytime I'm doing a story, like I said, I would not classify myself as a wildlife photographer. Kind of like with being interested in birds, I'm very fascinated in birds. This fall, we've had lots of herons along the creek. Green herons, black-crowned night herons, lots of really cool birds that I love to take the kids down and just watch them. And I actually find, even though I'm a photographer, I actually find it more inviting and more fun for me to visit those areas and experiences with my kids without my camera. Because I find, personally, every time I have my camera, I go into work mode, So there are times where I'll take my son down and we'll sit and we'll wait for the herons in the evening for maybe about 30 minutes before it starts to get dark. And the black-crowned night heron almost comes to the exact same spot every night. And so we'll do that, and I'll go through that process of inviting those things into our world. And I really love that, when we can bridge that gap. So what makes animals more relatable to humans, do you think? Right? Does anybody have an idea of what they're looking for, and maybe a still image that really captures something out of that bird that is relatable to humans? I would say that is some character, right? Animals all have some sort of personality, and I love when I can capture that. I sat in on the panel before. I sat in here for a few minutes, and I love seeing the images where you can really kind of see some personality in those birds, and a lot of the wildlife in those photos. So I love seeing that. I love observing of how they are inquisitive, the way their heads move, the way they move, the way they go through water in the case of the story I'm going to play for you. But then once again, as mentioned by a lot of wildlife photographers, you have to be prepared, right? So if you're going to do a story about a fish, which is the one I'm going to play, then what do you need? How do you get a picture of a fish? You need to be with the fish under the water. And then obviously, as wildlife photographers and conservationists, we don't want to disturb them as much as possible, but there are ways that we can go about that and try to minimize the damage that we do as photographers on occasion. Not on purpose, hopefully, for no one in this room is ever trying to damage any environment or get in the way of the animals, but we're trying to tell this story around them. So I'm going to play this story, and you will figure out right away some of the gear that I may have needed to tell this story, and I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards. So.
Most of our encounters with sunfish come at the end of a line.
Digging for worms, for a treat for Greenie.
Holly Jorgensen has encounters of another kind.
There he is. Hi, sweetie.
Holly wasn't looking for a pal when she first locked eyes with the green sunfish.
Hey, Greenie.
Just off her dock.
But he looked at me like I've never had a fish look at me.
From fish eyes
Can you jump?
came a friendship.
There you go. He sure does seem like a special fish. You saw that. He just acts different from other fish. There you go.
Even before Holly began serving snacks, Greenie would be waiting at the dock.
Why he in particular recognizes me and looks at me the way he does and follows me around, I don't know. But it's wonderful.
Waiting, too, after ice out for 5 straight years.
And I go, wow, he made it through another winter.
Greenie isn't alone in Holly's lake,
See, they're all getting friendly now.
but is the only fish we saw that appeared to relish a chin rub.
Yeah. Hi, sweetie.
Holly asked that we not divulge the location of her lake for obvious reasons.
Actually, last Friday night, he showed up and he had a hook in his mouth, and my heart just sank. And I just very, very carefully backed it out and put him back in the water and went, whoa, and then we were both relieved.
When Holly swims to the other side of the lake, Greenie's been known to tag along.
Here he is. People complain about, no entertainment, no movies, no bars, no restaurants. I could care less. I've got this. It's better. Here you go.
So enamored, Holly wrote Greenie a poem.
To have a friend who's not like me is to swim in the sky and fly in the sea.
She titled her poem Diversity.
It's entering someone else's world.
Sunfish remain a nice catch.
I'm petting them.
But in the most stressful of years, Greenie gives Holly Jorgensen
Because you're the boss, aren't you?
her release.
You're the boss.
Boyd Huppert, KARE 11 News, somewhere in Minnesota.
All right. So that story was actually one that I found in a Facebook group that many of you are probably involved in, maybe in your home state, but it was a Minnesota photography group. And this, this woman had posted, Holly, had posted that picture of the hook in the mouth. And the story I was reading, I was like, wait a minute, hold on. So she finds this fish with a hook in the mouth, and she picks it up out of the water. Like, I was like, how did she manage to pick up a fish with her bare hand? I mean, she's not a bear. She's not, So I reached out to her, and she said, no, I've formed this relationship with this fish. His name is Greenie, and we're best friends. And so at first I was like, okay, this woman is. Okay. So I called her. I asked for her number, and it was the strangest thing, honestly, because it was like 1 a.m. I just messaged her and just asked her, and she was still up. And she's also a writer. She's working on a book, so she was very enthusiastic to have us out there. But finding those things when you're looking for a story, I'm with most of you when I see people post a picture of an eagle or a nest or something like that. There's always someone in that comment, where is this? I'd love to get a picture, and I love it when I see people. Yeah, I'm not going to disclose the location, but if you know where it is, please keep that to yourself. I try to abide by that as much as possible as well. And obviously Holly didn't want us to say where her lake was, so people would show up and try and catch that sunfish. Any questions for me, maybe regarding how to tell this story or anything like that? Yes? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, definitely come prepared, right? So I came prepared with my swimsuit. I was ready to go in the water if I needed to go in the water. I didn't know if Holly was going to try and go in the water with Greenie, but I had, I think, 2 GoPros and then a 360, waterproof 360 Rilo camera. And the reason I wanted to bring the 360 camera is obviously we all want to anticipate action, right? If we're following the trail of a deer or a elk or whatever, we want to position ourselves where that shot's going to be perfect. So with a fish, how do you do that? Where is a fish going to go? I have no idea. I have no idea where this fish is going to go. So at first I used GoPros and just put them on the ground, and that's where you got that nice looking up at Holly shot. That's one of my favorite shots in there, where all the fish are kind of congregating underneath her. But the 360 camera allowed me to just kind of put it in there, and then I can decide which angle of shot I use later on. So, and that's also the one that I used where it was like super like fish eye, pardon the pun, fish eye look, where it's half in the water, half out. That was using the 360 camera, and then I expand the focal length, or expand the, you get what I'm saying there. I'm blanking, but yes. Anything else? Any other questions? Yeah. Yes. So Boyd was with me for the main shoot, and then I think I needed a few more shots. I didn't feel like I had enough shots of Greenie. So I went back, and sure enough, Greenie was hanging out at the dock, ready to get some beetles that she loves to feed him, and worms. So You know, I was concerned, honestly, when we did this story. I wasn't sure about the hand feeding of an animal, to be honest. It was a little nerve-wracking for me at first. But then once I got there, I quickly realized that this fish was going to have a pretty damn good life. So I wasn't too worried, and maybe he doesn't have the most traditional wildlife experience, but I felt like he was going to be just fine. So anything else? And she was very conscious of that as well. She's also very into conservation, and a lot of her photography is around that. So
Let's take one more for Chad, and then I want to open it up to the rest of the group. We've got about 5-6 minutes to go ahead.
So like in terms of your setup, so you used to go like 2 GoPros,
yeah.
camera, and then for like all these wide shots,
Mm-hmm.
is that just like a tripod shot? Like what kind of setup was this for like these kind of base shots that weren't in the water?
Yeah. So most of the time, similar to what Thomas had mentioned. So I have 2 mirrorless cameras. I have an A7R3 and an A7R4, and I use those for video primarily. I'm not an exceptional still photographer. I dabble sometimes, but I'm not great at it. But those are 2 of the cameras I had on the shoot, and then also I have like a traditional, more television news ENG camera, Sony X400. Which has a really long throw telephoto lens, and then obviously I'm using, 16 to 35 millimeter lens on that full frame is just that huge epic wide shot that you're speaking of. So that really helps me change my shot selection and tell the story. Yep. All right.
Thanks. Now questions for the group. Do you have anything you'd like to direct to all of them? Anybody? One thing I can ask. Oh, did somebody have a hand? No? Okay, I'm going to ask. I used to do this, not as, near as well as you guys, and when we were shooting spot news, we were just go, or we were shooting a story on business or politics or something like that. It was like, gotta get going, get the shot, get the interview, get moving, get going. On this, you don't really want to be that way always, right? Tell us about that a little bit. What's your mindset when you're going into a story like the stories like we just saw?
Well, so I think for me, really, I'm always trying to slow down. Like everything is trying to slow down, even in breaking news situations. I'm really trying to see the whole thing. I think great photographers, Boyd talks about this a lot too, because he's obviously worked with some good photographers throughout his career. I think great photographers are always a step ahead, almost a chess player. And so when we're doing that, we're constantly trying to slow down because we need to think about what our moves are, what's our next step. If I miss the shot of this, then where's my next move? Or once I get that shot, where's my next move, we tend to have to move around a lot more. I would love to spend like 7 hours in a blind just to get one still and call that a day, but I have a lot of different shots I have to build in an 8-hour day to put it to air. So I am always trying to slow down, I guess, regardless of what the story is, if that's helpful for anyone.
I think sometimes it can feel like breaking news, though. Like I saw those pictures of the eagles flying in the air, and that can probably feel like, oh my God, I gotta get that, and I gotta get the reaction to it, and then I gotta get that, and then I think it can feel like breaking news. I've been out in those situations where I've gotta get both things. The bird isn't as cool unless the human is reacting to it. So some of them are really slow, like elk bugling don't really go anywhere, and that's pretty easy. But like birds flying, that's my like, oh God, I don't know, where am I going?
Chad, that's definitely on. Okay, for me, it's about being a photographer is about being patient, right? But also anticipating that, and so I kind of call it compressed patience. So I compress that by putting myself in a good position to get that, and then I can be patient that way. And an example was when I was in Alaska and droning over, there was these orca whales, and I was like, that's gonna be my opening shot, and I positioned the drone in front of their path, and I kept flying over it just to see if it'll pop up, because they kept popping up, but I compressed that patience, moved it over, anticipated their shot, or their surfacing, and I was able to get that. It took like 12 minutes. And for like us in news, 12 minutes is forever, I think. But, and I don't know, I think it's just about kind of making your own luck and putting yourself in a good position for that.
Yeah. I remember when Chad was shooting this, he really wanted to get the shot from the water looking back, so off the end of the dock looking back at Holly, and you saw some shots of her where she was looking out toward the lake, and he was actually asking the questions then because I didn't want her turning around looking back at me. We wanted her looking out over the lake, so Chad was asking her a few questions. And then, and you had brought your swimsuit, so she had a ladder, so you were going to walk down into the water, and he took a step, and it was obvious.
I was way over my head.
It was over his head.
I would have to kick water the whole time we were doing the story, and it just wasn't going to work.
So then she had a little dinghy that she had tied
boat.
up, so he gets in this little dinghy, and he had his camera, and he's trying to row it with one oar, and
trying to not get in the way.
Keep it steady and not turn, so he could ask her some questions, and then I would have to be behind him, not to be in the shot, which would be lake, so I walked up the steps, and she had a little couch, and I actually fell asleep on there for about half an hour while you were down working, so yeah, it slowed down for me considerably.
Yeah.
And
Anybody else?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Chad. Trying to see if I can see anybody.
Yeah,
we edit together for the most part.
What's
I mean,
that?
not together, but
yeah. No, it'll kind of work like this. So I'll write a script, and then and for those not familiar with TV production, I go into a booth and then I read it, and then I send the track, my voice, to Chad and hand him the script. We go over it together, and then I kind of step away from the process for the most part. He'll call me into the edit bay and say, hey, I'm kind of thinking this for the open. Do you like the way this is going? And I'll say, yeah. And then maybe once or twice more during the process we'll connect like that. But I'm either working on setting up the next story, and they're writing a web script, or doing a photo gallery, or writing promos and social media things. So those are things that I'm working on while he's editing.
Well, Boyd's being kind of kind, though. I mean, he gives me so many notes. I mean, I know I'm the one physically hitting the buttons, but he's he lays out a lot of stuff for me for the edit. You know, like, I was thinking we would use this sound of Holly, you know, those sorts of things. And, you know, so when we go over a script, I mean, Boyd's one of the most prepared script readers I've ever worked with, and it's super helpful for me. So yeah, he's not necessarily in my office with me, but I edit, but definitely, I mean, he knows what works, and it's great.
Got another question right here.
Thank you all very much for sharing with us today. Appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
Have you all ever invested a lot of time and energy into a project that no one cared about or that was never you?
Actually, I did that with a CSU professor a few years ago, and I felt so bad. I traveled with them. They were documenting the Mississippi Flyway from following migratory birds from the Gulf of Mexico all the way to northern Minnesota. And so I met up with them about 5 hours up north, and I shot with them beautiful birds, and they were doing pictures and making an audio recording of all those birds, and they did such a wonderful job and put it out to everybody. But I was there to do the story with them, and I invested a lot of time for them and a lot of time in mine, and it never seemed to make air for a variety of reasons. I think we had some breaking news show up, and then it got too late in the year, and now it's like, okay, well, the birds aren't migrating. It just kind of fell off, and that was my fault, and I wrote them and apologized and said, hey, unfortunately, I don't know if that story's ever gonna air. But yeah, I mean, it happens. Typically it doesn't, because, you know, Anne's a manager, I'm a manager, you know, it's hard to send somebody for 8 hours to go work on something and then you get nothing in return in a world of television news, but it does happen.
Time for one more. I think we're out of time. Anybody? Well, that's it. We really appreciate you doing this. It's incredible to see 4 people at the top of their game able to come here and show us what they're doing and then to talk about it. So we really appreciate what you're doing. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having everyone.